from Utradia here. Today we are going to be looking at Fisker, FSR. This will be a little bit different than other investment videos you might have seen on YouTube. The reason being is we're going to be looking at the recent Stocktwits and Twitter sentiment trends for Fisker. So hopefully if you're an existing Fisker investor or looking to potentially buy in, you will find this useful. Before we get into things, if you can please subscribe, like the video, that'd mean a ton to me. If you have any questions, thoughts, drop a comment below. Happy to answer them, happy to dive into other things about Fisker or any other stocks that you might have in your portfolio. Awesome, let's get started. So just starting off here on our blog page, this was posted by George Lucas, one of our super users on Utradia. And essentially he was breaking down Fisker in terms of Stocktwits and Twitter. Essentially it is asking the question, are the Twitter and sentiment trends still positive? Before we answer that question, just a bit of perspective. So typically the reason you want to be following what's happening on Twitter and Stocktwits is in a 24-hour period, there's over almost 250,000 tweets and 5 million impressions for the top 200 tickers on Twitter alone. And FSR is up there most of the time, usually in the top 50. So being able to understand, what the most recent trends, sentiment are about Fisker is helpful. Obviously, we've seen the impact and power of these type of social sentiment trends, social media trends on stocks, and Fisker's no different. So a useful data point as an investor. Okay, so answering the question, is it trending on Stocktwits? So average daily message volume is about 849 messages. I'd say that's a little bit under the average overall volume if I think about most tickers on Stocktwits, but not that little. So still a good amount of messages throughout the Fisker community. In terms of Twitter itself, so who are the main Fisker Twitter influencers? What's interesting to note is, they average about 463 tweets and 2 million impressions in 24 hours. This is important because an impression is essentially a person who sees a tweet that has the hashtag FSR. And typically the more people that see tweets about Fisker, the more action it gets. And typically that leads to increased, trading volume and price action. And then following that, essentially it's good to know the influential Twitter accounts. So tying into the impressions, the more accounts that have a high number of followers, again, more people that see a tweet pertaining to Fisker. Now we need to figure out, are these positive tweets, negative tweets, and that's coming down to the sentiment aspect. But this is just a quick overview of what's been going on with Fisker lately. Okay, I'm just jumping over to the Utradia social sentiment dashboard. This pulls in real-time Twitter and Stocktwits posts and tweets and analyzes them to figure out, how this social sentiment correlates with price and volume over given periods of time. I've already selected Fisker, as you can see, and we're looking at the last 3 months. So the last 3 months, I have sentiment here in purple. Sentiment overall has been positive. Now you can see obviously the price has been in this channel. We saw it spike, this was April 3rd, just shy of $15 a share, but has been kind of running in this channel between, $13, $14 a share all the way down to about $10 a share. What's good to note is obviously the sentiment is still positive. What we can do is zoom in a little bit and look at the last week or even 2 weeks. And here's where we'll see a bit of a change. And sentiment is tracking when someone tweets about Fisker. Is it a positive tweet or is it a negative tweet? What are the words that are in the tweet that indicate how people are feeling about it? And again, you tie this into impressions, and this can typically impact and influence what people do with the stock, especially retail investors. And obviously, institutional investors are tracking this type of chatter as well. So if we jump over to look at the influential influencer feed, we can see the top accounts that are tweeting about Fisker in the last little while. Let's jump over to the last last week here. If we jump in, you can select the actual tweets. So more recently, this is this week. The big news is Fisker CEO deleting his Twitter account. In the grand scheme of things, I don't think that's that big of a deal. Maybe the market's reacting a little bit to that with the price drop we saw earlier today. But to be honest, it doesn't matter whether or not a CEO has a Twitter account. Obviously, with Elon taking over, he can potentially, impact how markets move. But I don't necessarily think it's that important because there's a ton of other CEOs out there that don't have Twitter accounts, don't actively use Twitter accounts. It's more important to figure out who are the main accounts that are tweeting about Fisker. So that's kind of an overview of what's been going on from a social sentiment and price perspective. Again, choppy sentiment, but if we zoom out to kind of last 2 weeks as well as the last month, overall, generally positive sentiment, which is good to see. And similarly, you can see this here. So if we look at this most recent month versus the prior month, overall everything is up. Obviously, the price hasn't been moving in the direction that you would have wanted to if you're a current Fisker investor, but it's something that I think we'll start to see it rebound a little bit. Again, thinking about the overall macro environment in the markets right now, the last few months have been kind of tough. So similarly, like I said, you can see the price action, and this is the 3-month view. And if we jump over to impressions, we see kind of this big spike here. So last thing I want to jump over to is the actual stock page itself. This is where you can find kind of the breakdown of what you typically want to see if you're investing in Fisker or thinking about investing in it. Essentially shows you the performance over the last little while, recent chart. You can see the real-time news, which is kind of useful. And then if you want, you can jump into some of the posts that people have shared on Tradia, which is useful if you want to find additional insights and analysis about Fisker. So hopefully you guys found this video useful. I'll provide the links in the description below. Again, as I said, blog, this is an overview, what's going on with Fisker recently, social sentiment dashboard. Here you can track the real-time trends of what's happening with Fisker. And super useful for FSR or any other stock that you have in your portfolio. So highly recommend checking this out, and happy trading.